The courtroom fell into a suffocating silence as the last attorney from Sterling and Pierce walked out, his $5,000 Italian shoes clicking against marble with absolute finality. At the defendant's table, Natalia Crane sat frozen, her hands trembling so violently she had to grip the edge of the wooden surface just to keep them still. The billionaire tech mogul who once commanded boardrooms across 3 continents now looked small, abandoned, utterly alone in a room packed with 200 people who wanted to watch her fall. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, his voice dripping with theatrical satisfaction, "given that the defendant has no legal representation, we move for immediate—" "I will represent her." The voice came from the back of the courtroom, deep and rough like gravel underfoot. Every head turned. Standing beside a yellow cleaning cart, still holding a mop with both hands, was a man in his late 40s. His navy blue janitor's uniform was worn at the elbows, his graying hair slightly disheveled from hours of work. But his eyes, those dark, unwavering eyes, held something the room hadn't expected: absolute certainty. Nobody in that courtroom knew that this moment would unravel one of the most sophisticated conspiracies in modern American history. Nobody knew that the janitor standing there had once been the most feared defense attorney in Manhattan, and nobody, not the prosecutors, not the judge, not even Natalia herself, could have predicted what would happen next. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice, redemption, and a love that defied every boundary society could construct, I want you to do something. Drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from, your city, your country, wherever you are in this world. And if you believe that everyone, no matter how rich or how poor, deserves a fair fight in court, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel tells stories about people who refuse to give up, who stand up when everyone else sits down. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next, because what happened in this courtroom will restore your faith in humanity. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Let's see what brought a forgotten legal genius out of the shadows at the exact moment when hope seemed completely lost. The city of Boston never slept, but at 4:30 in the morning, it whispered. Raymond Cole knew every whisper by heart. He had been cleaning the Suffolk County Courthouse for 17 years, arriving before dawn, leaving after most attorneys had gone home to their expensive apartments overlooking the harbor. His small studio in Dorchester was still dark when he left each morning, the only decoration a faded photograph of his wife, Lydia, taken 20 years ago at their wedding. Cancer had taken her 12 back, along with every dream they'd built together. Next to that photograph was another, his daughter Octavia, now 23 and in her final year of medical school. In the frame, she was only 7, smiling with missing front teeth, completely unaware that her mother had only 3 more years to live. Raymond hadn't turned on the lights in years when he left for work. Winter electricity in Boston was expensive, and with a salary of $2,900 a month, he counted every dollar. Breakfast was always the same: black coffee, whatever bread he could get on discount, and leftovers from the courthouse basement cafeteria, a small privilege for maintenance staff that saved him about $40 a week. That October morning, as Raymond pushed his cart down the 4th-floor corridor, he paused outside courtroom 407. The brass plaque gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Major civil litigation, Judge Kathleen Brennan presiding. This was where the biggest cases in Massachusetts played out, where fortunes were won and lost, where reputations were built or shattered in a single afternoon. Raymond had cleaned this room 6,000 times, maybe more. He'd listened to closing arguments while emptying trash bins, heard witness testimony while polishing benches, absorbed legal strategy while mopping floors that reflected the anxious faces of people fighting for their lives. The lawyers never noticed him. To them, he was furniture, invisible, not worth acknowledging. They spoke freely when he was in the room, discussing their strategies, mocking their opponents, sometimes even their own clients. Raymond had learned more about the law from their careless conversations than most people learned in law school. But Raymond Cole hadn't always been invisible. 17 years ago, he'd been one of the rising stars at Montgomery and Associates, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. He had an office on the 19th floor with a view of Boston Harbor. He had a win record that made senior partners nervous and made clients willing to pay premium rates. He had a brilliant future until everything collapsed in a single devastating week. He pushed those memories down deep, the way he always did. That was another life, another person. Now he mopped floors, polished brass, emptied trash. Honest work that paid rent and allowed him to send Octavia money every month, even though she always refused to take it, insisting she could manage on student loans. She had her mother's stubbornness, her mother's fire. It kept Raymond going on the mornings when getting out of bed felt impossible. Her phone buzzed, a text from her supervisor. Cole, 407 needs deep clean by 8 a.m. VIP case starting today. Don't mess this up. VIP meant pressure. VIP meant inspectors crawling over every surface, looking for any excuse to write him up. VIP meant attorneys who'd complain if they saw a single streak on the windows. But Raymond never complained. He just worked. By 8:45, Courtroom 407 was packed beyond capacity. Reporters pressed shoulder to shoulder in the gallery, their laptops open, cameras ready. Attorneys in suits that cost more than Raymond made in 6 months straightened their ties and shuffled papers with practiced importance. At the defense table, Natalia Crane sat alone in a sea of empty chairs. Raymond recognized her immediately. Everyone in Boston did. At 41, Natalia had built Quantum Horizon from nothing into a tech empire worth $19 billion. Her quantum encryption technology had revolutionized data security, making her both incredibly wealthy and incredibly powerful. Forbes called her the woman who made secrets unbreakable. Time magazine featured her on their cover with the headline, "The Future is Encrypted." But today, she looked nothing like those magazine covers. Her tailored gray suit hung on a frame that seemed to have lost weight overnight. Her dark hair, usually perfectly styled, was pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Her green eyes, usually sharp enough to cut through boardroom opposition, were clouded with exhaustion and something else Raymond recognized too well, the particular terror that comes when the entire system turns against you. Around her were 8 empty chairs, 8 seats reserved for her legal team from Sterling & Pierce, Boston's most expensive law firm, charging $8,500 per hour for their senior partners. Raymond had seen them in here just yesterday, a small army of lawyers preparing their defense, exuding the confidence that unlimited money could buy. But they weren't here now. Natalia kept checking her phone, making calls that nobody answered. Each time she set the phone down, her face grew paler, her hands shook harder. Raymond had seen this before. He knew exactly what was happening. They had abandoned her. All of them. Every single attorney who'd promised to fight for her had walked away. "All rise." The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur. Judge Kathleen Brennan entered. 60 years old, iron gray hair, a face carved from decades of seeing every lie, every manipulation, every desperate plea the legal system could produce. She took her seat, surveyed the courtroom with eyes that missed nothing, and stopped cold when she saw the empty chairs at the defense table. "Miss Crane," Judge Brennan said, her voice carrying the weight of inevitability, "where is your legal representation?" Natalia stood, trying desperately to keep her composure, but her voice cracked. "Your Honor, they were here yesterday. I've been calling all morning. Nobody's answering. I don't understand what—" "Your Honor," the prosecutor interrupted, rising with barely concealed glee. Lawrence Whitmore was a career prosecutor who'd made his reputation destroying powerful people. Thin, sharp-featured, with a smile that never reached his eyes, he moved like a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. "It's clear the defense has been abandoned. Given the severity of the charges and the complete absence of legal counsel, we move for immediate default judgment." The courtroom erupted into whispers. Reporters typed frantically. Cameras flashed, despite the bailiff's warnings. Judge Brennan raised her hand for silence, then looked at Natalia with something that might have been sympathy. Miss Crane, I cannot allow this trial to proceed without proper representation. If you have no attorney, I am forced to... I will represent her. The words came from Raymond Cole, standing at the back of the courtroom next to his cleaning cart, the mop still gripped in both hands. The room fell into absolute silence. Then came the laughter, soft at first, then louder, rippling through the gallery like a wave. But Raymond didn't flinch. He set the mop down carefully as if it were something precious and walked up the center aisle. 17 years of mopping floors couldn't erase the posture of a man who'd once commanded this very courtroom. His shoulders were back, his stride was steady, his eyes were fixed at Judge Brennan with the kind of focus that made the laughter die in people's throats. "State your name for the record," Judge Brennan said, her eyebrows raised. "Mr. Cole, Your Honor, I would like to offer my services as counsel for Miss Crane." Lawrence Whitmore laughed out loud, a harsh, mocking sound. "Your Honor, this is absurd. A janitor wants to play lawyer. This is a mockery of—" "I am a licensed attorney in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts," Raymond said calmly, pulling out his wallet. From it he produced a worn but valid bar card. Member number 47293, admitted 18 years ago. A new wave of whispers swept the room, but this time with a different tone. Judge Brennan gestured for the bailiff to bring her the card. She examined it carefully, her expression shifting from skepticism to something else, recognition perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. "Mr. Cole," she said slowly, "according to this, you haven't practiced law in 17 years. "That's correct, Your Honor." "And you believe you're still competent to represent a client in a case of this magnitude?" Raymond met her eyes without hesitation. "Your Honor, this woman deserves to be defended. I know the law, I know procedure, and I understand what justice means. Not the kind purchased with expensive suits and corporate connections, but the kind that's supposed to be available to every person who walks into this courtroom." The room held its breath. Judge Brennan studied Raymond for what felt like an eternity. Then she turned to Natalia. "Miss Crane, this is your decision. Do you accept Mr. Cole as your attorney?" Natalia stood slowly. She looked at Raymond, really looked at him for the first time, not seeing a janitor, not seeing someone beneath her notice. She saw something in his eyes that $8,500 an hour attorneys had never shown her. Genuine, uncomplicated sincerity. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice steadying. "I accept Mr. Cole." The courtroom erupted again. Judge Brennan slammed her gavel. "Order! Mr. Cole, you have 20 minutes to confer with your client. Do not waste the court's time." Raymond approached the defense table and was immediately blocked by a court security officer. "Sorry, only attorneys allowed past this point." Raymond held up his bar card. Judge Brennan nodded confirmation. The officer stepped aside, looking embarrassed. When Raymond sat down next to Natalia, he felt every eye in the courtroom fixed on them, but he looked only at her. "Something is very wrong here," he whispered. "This isn't just about your lawyers leaving. This is orchestrated." Natalia's eyes widened. "How do you know?" "Because I've cleaned this courthouse for 17 years. I've watched thousands of cases. I've seen how things work when they're legitimate and how they work when they're not. This," he gestured subtly at the prosecutorial team, the empty chairs, the timing, "this is a setup." "Then who's behind it?" "We'll find out, but first I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning." For the next 18 minutes, Natalia spoke faster than she'd ever spoken in her life, trying to compress 6 months of legal preparation into an emergency briefing. She told him about her technology, a quantum encryption system that made current security protocols obsolete, worth potentially trillions in government and corporate contracts. She told him about Helix Technologies, the defense contractor accusing her of stealing their research. She told him about the 6 months of hell since the lawsuit began. Stock prices collapsing, board members resigning, partners abandoning ship, media assassinating her character. Raymond listened without taking notes. He absorbed every word, every pause, every moment when her voice caught. His eyes never left her face. She realized he wasn't just hearing the facts. He was reading her, understanding the truth beneath the words. "Time's up," the bailiff announced. Judge Brennan slammed her gavel. "Mr. Cole, are you prepared to deliver an opening statement?" Raymond stood and walked to the podium. The weight of 200 stairs pressed down on him. How long had it been since he'd stood here? How many nights had he lain awake in his tiny studio apartment, dreaming of a moment like this, only to wake up again with a mop in his hand? He placed both palms on the smooth wood of the podium, drew a deep breath, and lifted his head to face the jury.
"Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice calm and clear, "my name is Raymond Cole. I need to apologize for my appearance. I'm not wearing a suit from Brooks Brothers like my colleagues across the aisle. I don't have a team of paralegals or fancy presentation slides. Less than 2 hours ago, I was still mopping the floor of this very courtroom." Soft laughter rippled through the gallery, but Raymond didn't falter. "For 17 years, I've stood in this room almost every single day, watching justice unfold. I've seen truth win. I've seen truth buried. I've learned that justice doesn't depend on how much money you have or what law firm represents you. It depends on something much simpler and much more powerful: the truth." He paused, letting silence settle. "The truth in this case is straightforward. Natalia Crane didn't steal anything. She created revolutionary technology through her own intelligence, years of research, and relentless dedication. Meanwhile, those who want to take that technology from her are using this courtroom as a weapon. They're using the legal system itself to commit theft, the very crime they're accusing her of." "Objection," Lawrence Whitmore shot to his feet. "He's arguing, not presenting facts." "Sustained," Judge Brennan said. "Mr. Cole, keep your opening statement focused on what you intend to prove." Raymond nodded. "My apologies, Your Honor. What I intend to prove is simple. By the time this trial ends, it will be absolutely clear who's telling the truth and who's built an entire case on lies." He sat down. It wasn't polished, it wasn't theatrical, but it was real, and from the expressions on several jurors' faces, Raymond knew at least some of them were truly listening. Lawrence Whitmore rose for his opening statement, buttoning his jacket with practiced elegance. He moved to the podium like he owned it, like he owned the entire courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth as silk, "this case is remarkably simple. Theft. Corporate espionage. Natalia Crane used her connections in the technology sector to gain access to Helix Technologies' classified research. She copied their designs, filed patents under her own name, and built a billion-dollar company on stolen work." Whitmore walked slowly, his gaze sweeping across the jury box. "We will prove this with documents, with expert testimony, with witnesses who worked alongside Ms. Crane and watched her commit these crimes. By the end of this trial, you will have no doubt Natalia Crane is a thief who must be held accountable." He sat down with the confidence of someone who'd already won. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of prosecution witnesses. First came Dr. Theodore Hammond, a quantum physicist, who testified that Natalia's encryption protocols were suspiciously similar to Helix's internal research. Then came Rebecca Yates, a former Quantum Horizon employee, who claimed she'd seen Natalia accessing files she shouldn't have had. Each witness was polished, prepared, devastating. When it came time for cross-examination, Raymond stood. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of muscle memory returning after 17 years. He approached Dr. Hammond, who sat in the witness box with the self-assured posture of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room.
Dr. Hammond, Raymond began gently, you testified that Ms. Crane's work is suspiciously similar to Helix's research. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. When did you first review Helix's research? In March of 2021. And when did Ms. Crane publish her first paper on quantum encryption? Hammond hesitated. I believe it was earlier? Could you be more specific? I'd need to check the exact date. Raymond handed him the document. This is Ms. Crane's doctoral dissertation from MIT, published in December 2019. It details the exact encryption protocols you claim she stole from Helix. Would you like to explain how she stole research that didn't exist yet? The courtroom went silent. Hammond's face flushed red. The similarity could be coincidental, or, Raymond interrupted quietly, or your entire testimony is based on reviewing the wrong timeline. No further questions. By the time court adjourned for the day, Raymond had systematically dismantled 2 of the prosecution's star witnesses. Judge Brennan looked at him with grudging respect. Mr. Cole, you might want to invest in a proper suit for tomorrow. Raymond nodded. I'll see what I can do, Your Honor. But as he left the courtroom, he knew the truth. He couldn't afford a new suit. The only one he owned had been hanging in his closet for 12 years, and it fit him like a bag after years of physical labor had changed his body. Natalia caught up with him in the hallway, slightly breathless. Mr. Cole, she said. Raymond, he said, please. Raymond, she looked at him with an expression she couldn't quite read. Why are you doing this? Because it's right. That's it? That's the only reason? Raymond thought about that question for a long moment. 17 years ago, I had everything, a career, a reputation, a future. Then someone with money and power decided I was a threat. They destroyed me, took everything except my knowledge and my daughter. I lost years I should have spent watching Octavia grow up. I lost the ability to do the work I loved. I met Natalia's eyes. I can't get those years back, but I can make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to you. I want to pay you, Natalia said immediately, whatever you need. No, Raymond said firmly. If this were about money, I wouldn't have stood up this morning. I'm doing this because the law is supposed to protect people, not be a weapon for the powerful. Natalia stared at him, seeing the man behind the janitor's uniform for the first time. Then at least let me help prepare. Come to my house tonight. I have all the documents, all the evidence. We need to build a real defense. I have a shift tonight, Raymond said. I work until 2 in the morning. A shift? Natalia's voice rose in disbelief. But you're my lawyer. And I'm also a janitor who needs to pay rent. The court isn't paying me to defend you. This is pro bono, free, which means I still need my job if I want to eat. For the first time in her life, Natalia truly understood the distance between her world and his. Paying $8,500 an hour used to seem normal. For this man, missing a single shift might mean choosing between electricity and food. I'll come after my shift, Raymond said. Is 3 in the morning too late? 3 is perfect, Natalia replied softly. At 3:15 in the morning, Raymond parked his 20-year-old Honda outside the gates of Natalia's estate in Newton. He was still wearing his janitor's uniform, which smelled of industrial cleaner and carried the exhaustion of an 8-hour shift. He hadn't had time to go home and change. The security guard had been told to expect him, but the way the man looked at Raymond's car said everything. You don't belong here. Natalia met him at the front door, still dressed in casual clothes, eyes red from lack of sleep. Coffee? She asked. Raymond nodded gratefully. She poured him a cup from a machine that cost more than 3 months of his salary. The coffee was rich, smooth, nothing like the instant powder he drank every morning. Tell me the real story, Raymond said, setting down the cup. Not the version you told your lawyers, not the version for the media, the truth. Natalia sat down, her hands wrapped around her own coffee cup as if seeking warmth. I started Quantum Horizon 14 years ago, she began, fresh out of MIT, completely obsessed with quantum computing. Everyone told me that stable quantum encryption at room temperature was impossible. The equations didn't work. The physics didn't support it. Her eyes lit up when she talked about her work, the first genuine animation Raymond had seen in her. But I had a theory. What if we weren't trying to prevent quantum decoherence, but instead use it as part of the encryption itself, use the instability as the key? How long did it take? Asked Raymond. 8 years in a studio apartment in Cambridge, living on ramen and student loans. No funding, no lab, just me and my laptop. She stood and opened a wall safe behind a painting, pulling out a folder. Here, every piece of original research, dated, notarized, witnessed, proof that I developed this technology before Helix even existed.
Raymond opened the folder. Inside were hundreds of pages of equations, diagrams, handwritten notes, raw, detailed, undeniable. Why didn't Sterling and Pierce present this? He asked, already knowing the answer. They said it wasn't necessary. They said they had a better strategy. Raymond closed the folder, his jaw tightening. Not presenting your strongest evidence isn't a strategy, it's sabotage. Natalia's face went pale. You think they were paid to lose? I think your lawyers were paid to make sure you lost, Raymond said bluntly. The question is, who paid them? They worked until 6 in the morning, going through every email, every document, every piece of communication. The pattern became clearer with each page. Crucial witnesses ignored, key evidence buried, objections filed at precisely the wrong moments. Sterling and Pierce hadn't just failed to defend Natalia, they'd actively undermined her case. Is there anything else? Raymond asked. Anything strange that's happened in the past few months? Natalia hesitated, then nodded. My assistant, Paige. 2 months ago, I caught her copying files to a USB drive. Raymond leaned forward. And you didn't question her? I trusted her. Paige has worked for me for 7 years. I thought maybe she was backing up data like I'd asked before, but Natalia trailed off. But the timing was strange, and she got defensive when I asked about it. In cases like this, Raymond said carefully, nothing happens by accident. If she copied files, someone told her to do it. He looked directly at Natalia, his voice taking on a tone of absolute seriousness. Tomorrow, no matter what I say or do in court, you cannot react. No surprise, no corrections, no signals. Everything is part of the plan. Why? Because we're being watched. Maybe not right this second, but somewhere, somehow, they're monitoring everything we do. Every strategy we discuss, assume they already know about it. A chill ran down Natalia's spine. You've been through this before, haven't you? Raymond was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, 17 years ago, I represented a whistleblower against Titan Industries, an engineer who reported safety violations that killed 4 workers. I had evidence, documents, recordings, testimony. Then, 3 days before trial, everything vanished from my office safe. Natalia held her breath. They claimed I fabricated it, that I forged documents to damage the company. I was suspended, then disbarred. It took me 5 years to prove my innocence, 5 years doing whatever work I could find, 5 years watching my wife die from cancer without being able to afford better treatment, 5 years of my daughter growing up wondering why her father couldn't be the man he used to be. They destroyed you, Natalia whispered. They tried, Raymond corrected, but they didn't take the one thing that mattered, my knowledge, and that's something they'll never take from you. When Raymond left at 6:30, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Natalia stood at the window, watching his old Honda disappear down the long driveway. For the first time in months, she felt something she almost forgotten: hope. The next morning, Raymond entered the courthouse wearing a suit he'd bought from Goodwill the night before. It wasn't new, wasn't expensive, but it was clean and pressed.
$23 he could barely afford, but Judge Brennan had been right. Today, he needed to look like a real attorney. The courtroom was even more packed than before. The story of the janitor turned lawyer had spread across Boston, and reporters filled every available space. When Raymond walked in, a few people actually applauded, hesitant, uncertain, not sure whether to cheer or mock. Raymond ignored all of it. He had work to do. "The prosecution calls Miss Paige Thornton," Lawrence Whittemore announced. Raymond's head snapped up. Paige walked to the witness stand, her face carefully neutral. She was 34, professional, composed. She'd been Natalia's right hand for 7 years, and according to what they'd discussed last night, she was also a traitor. Lawrence led her through 20 minutes of testimony designed to paint Natalia as paranoid, secretive, obsessively focused on Helix's work. Each answer was carefully crafted to suggest guilt without overtly lying. When Raymond's turn came, he stood slowly, picking up a thin folder from the defense table. "Miss Thornton," he began gently, "you testified that you worked closely with Miss Crane for 7 years. Is that correct?" "Yes." "During that time, would you say you had access to sensitive files?" "Of course, that was part of my job." "Did you ever copy company files to external devices?" Paige's face remained calm. "Only when Miss Crane specifically requested backups." Raymond opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet. "Miss Thornton, this is a server log from Quantum Horizon's internal network. It shows that on August 14th of this year, you copied 847 files to a personal USB drive, files you then transferred to an external email account registered under a false name. Would you like to explain that?" The courtroom erupted. Paige's face went from composed to panicked in seconds. I don't know what you're—" "Objection," Lawrence Whittemore shouted. "The prosecution was never provided this evidence." "Your Honor," Raymond said calmly, "this log was obtained from Miss Crane's own servers. If the prosecution failed to investigate their own witnesses properly, that's not my fault." "Objection overruled," Judge Brennan said, leaning forward with sudden interest. "Continue, Mr. Cole." Raymond turned back to Paige. "Miss Thornton, did you receive payment from anyone associated with Helix Technologies?" "No." Raymond pulled out another document. "This is a bank statement showing a deposit of $75,000 into your account on August 20th, 6 days after you copied those files. The source? A consulting firm called Meridian Strategic Services. Would you like to guess who owns Meridian?" Paige said nothing, her hands gripping the edges of the witness stand. "Helix Technologies owns Meridian," Raymond continued. "It's a shell company they use for payments they don't want publicly associated with their main corporate accounts. Miss Thornton, you were paid to spy on Natalia Crane and steal her proprietary information. Isn't that correct?" "I want a lawyer," Paige whispered. "Your Honor," Raymond said, turning to Judge Brennan, "I move to have this witness held in contempt and request a full investigation into corporate espionage." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Lawrence Whittemore was on his feet, objecting to everything at once. Judge Brennan slammed her gavel repeatedly. "Order! This court is in recess for 1 hour while I review this evidence in chambers. Mr. Cole, Mr. Whittemore, with me, now." As they filed into Judge Brennan's chambers, Raymond caught Natalia's eye. She looked at him with something close to awe. He gave her the smallest nod. "We're winning."
An hour later, when court resumed, Judge Brennan's face was granite. "Based on the evidence presented, I am ordering a full investigation into potential witness tampering and corporate espionage. Miss Thornton, you are hereby held in contempt of court and will be taken into custody pending further proceedings." 2 bailiffs escorted Paige out. She didn't look at Natalia, didn't look at anyone. "Mr. Whittemore," Judge Brennan continued, "I suggest you spend tonight reviewing your case very carefully. We reconvene tomorrow at 9. Outside the courthouse, Natalia grabbed Raymond's arm. "How did you know about the payments to Paige?"
I didn't, not for certain, Raymond admitted, but last night you said she'd copied files. That meant someone told her to do it. And in corporate espionage cases, there's always a paper trail. I had someone check. Who? Raymond smiled. My daughter. Octavia might be in medical school, but she's better at research than most private investigators. His phone buzzed. A text from Octavia. Dad, I found something bigger. Call me immediately. Raymond's smile faded. We need to meet Octavia right now. 40 minutes later, they sat in a coffee shop in Cambridge, as far from Boston's legal district as they could get. The cafe was small, cramped, filled with MIT students studying for exams. Nobody paid attention to them. Octavia Cole walked in and Raymond stood up instinctively, awkward in the way fathers are when they're not sure they still have the right to hug their children. Octavia solved it by hugging him first. Quick, a little hesitant, but real. She was 23, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's determined chin. Jeans, a simple hoodie, but carrying a laptop that looked government-grade expensive. You must be Natalia, Octavia said, extending a hand. I've read about you. Your work on quantum entanglement is fascinating. Natalia shook her hand, surprised. You understand quantum physics? Pre-med requires a lot of science, Octavia said with a slight smile, but I've always been interested in your field. She opened her laptop. Okay, Dad asked me to look into Helix Technologies. At first, the company seems clean. Venture-funded, transparent corporate structure, everything by the book. She pulled up a series of documents. But when you dig into the ownership chain, things get strange. Helix is owned by a holding company in Delaware. That company is owned by another in the Cayman Islands, and that company, she paused for effect, is owned by Titan Industries. Raymond went completely still. Titan? Octavia asked. You know them? Oh yes, Raymond said, his voice hollow. Titan Industries is the company that destroyed my career 17 years ago. Natalia leaned forward. Why would an industrial manufacturing company care about quantum encryption? At first, I couldn't figure it out either, Octavia said, but then I read your research more carefully. She turned the laptop so they could both see. Your encryption technology isn't just for data security. If you can stabilize quantum states at room temperature, the applications for energy production and storage are revolutionary. She pulled up a research paper. A Princeton physicist published a theoretical paper last year showing that your technology could make traditional energy grids obsolete within 15 years. We're talking about the end of coal, oil, natural gas as primary sources. 15 years, Natalia repeated, each word heavy. And Titan Industries makes $34 billion annually from fossil fuels. If your technology works as described, they don't just lose market share, they lose everything. Raymond leaned back, the pieces finally clicking into place. So this isn't just a lawsuit. This is a coordinated attack by one of the most powerful industrial conglomerates in America to eliminate a technology that threatens their trillion-dollar empire. And they won't stop, Natalia said, her voice creeping into fear. If they did this to you 17 years ago, if they have this much reach, they'll do whatever it takes, Raymond finished grimly. Octavia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went pale. It's from the hospital. They're saying my position in the research program has been terminated, effective immediately. They fired you? Natalia asked, shocked. The email says funding restructured, but the timing... Octavia's voice hardened. They're sending a message. Raymond placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, guilt washing over him. I'm sorry. I never wanted to drag you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere, Octavia said, looking up at him with fierce determination. I chose this, and now that I'm in, I'm not backing down. We fight this together. For the first time in years, Raymond didn't see his daughter as the child who'd lost her mother or the young woman who'd grown up too fast. He saw her an equal, an ally, someone who'd inherited her mother's courage and his stubborn refusal to accept injustice. All right, he said, drawing a deep breath, then we do this together. Over the next 3 days, the pressure intensified in ways that made it clear they were no longer just fighting a legal battle, they were actually in a war. Raymond's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, there was nothing valuable to take, but everything was destroyed. His clothes torn from the closet, furniture overturned, the mattress slashed with deep, vicious cuts. The message was clear: we know where you live, and we can reach you any time we want. Octavia's laptop was hacked despite her security measures. She'd backed everything up to encrypted cloud storage, but the violation itself was the point. They wanted her to know she wasn't safe, that her digital life could be invaded at will. Then came the most direct threat. Natalia was leaving her office late one evening when a black Range Rover ran a red light and came straight at her car. Her driver, a former state trooper named Marcus Webb, swerved hard. The car spun, crashed into a concrete barrier, airbags deploying with explosive force. Natalia walked away with bruises and a cut above her eyebrow. Webb had a broken wrist, but they were alive. The Range Rover didn't stop. No license plate, no witnesses, no security footage that wasn't mysteriously corrupted. The next morning, Natalia called an emergency meeting at her estate. When Raymond and Octavia arrived, she was standing in the main living room with a man in a dark suit, her head of security, a former FBI agent named Colin Harding. "You both need to move in here," Natalia said without preamble. "We can't keep operating separately. They're picking us off one by one." "We can't just live in your house," Raymond began, uncomfortable with the idea. "This isn't a favor," Natalia cut in firmly. "This is strategy. Together, with professional security, we're safer. Separately, we're vulnerable." Octavia placed a hand on her father's arm. "She's right, Dad. How am I supposed to work if I'm constantly looking over my shoulder?" Reluctantly, Raymond agreed. That afternoon, they moved into the guest house on Natalia's property, a separate building that was still larger than anywhere Raymond had lived in his entire adult life. While Octavia explored the rooms with barely contained excitement, Raymond stood in the living room, hands in his pockets, feeling profoundly out of place. The high ceilings, the designer furniture, the artwork that probably cost more than he'd made in a decade, all of it screamed that he didn't belong. He stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the meticulously landscaped gardens, trying to reconcile this world with the studio apartment in Dorchester where he'd spent the last 17 years. Natalia entered the room and stood beside him, giving him space to breathe. "You're uncomfortable," she observed gently. "I've lived 17 years in 400 square feet. This isn't my world." "Maybe it should have been," Natalia replied. "You have talent, intelligence, integrity. You could have been anywhere, achieved anything if they hadn't taken it all from you." Raymond turned to look at her, really look at her, not as a client, not as a billionaire, but as a person fighting alongside him. Her green eyes, though exhausted, held something he'd rarely seen from someone in her position, genuine respect. "I don't need any of this," Raymond said, gesturing at the luxury surrounding them. "I never did. What I need is the chance to do what I was meant to do, help people who have no voice, fight for those who can't fight for themselves." "By helping me," Natalia said. "By standing against people who think money and power put them above the law," Raymond corrected. They stood in silence, the afternoon light streaming through the windows, creating patterns on the hardwood floor. The distance between their worlds, a janitor who used to be a lawyer and a billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing, was still vast. But in that moment, it felt crossable. They were on the same side, facing the same enemy. And something unspoken passed between them, something neither was quite ready to name. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source. At 2:30 in the morning, the security system alerted them to someone at the main gate. Colin Harding checked the cameras and his face registered shock. "It's Paige Thornton." "The witness?" Natalia stood up immediately. "What's she doing here?" "She looks terrified," Colin said, zooming in. Paige's face on the screen was pale, her hair disheveled, eyes wide with panic. Raymond was already moving. Let her in, but keep her under watch. This could be a trap. They met Paige in a secure room separate from the main house. When she saw Natalia, she nearly collapsed, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "God, Natalia, I'm so sorry for everything." "Sorry for what, exactly?" Natalia's voice was ice. Paige took a shuddering breath. "For betraying you, for stealing files, for lying on the stand, for all of it." "Who paid you?" Raymond asked, his voice calm but commanding. "Cameron Voss, the CEO of Helix. He came to me 8 months ago. He knew about something from my past, something I thought was buried." "What?" Natalia demanded. Paige looked at the floor, shame coloring her face. 12 years ago, before I worked for you, I was employed at a pharmaceutical company. I was young, stupid, and drowning in student debt. I embezzled $60,000. Not a fortune, but enough. I paid it back, and the company agreed not to press charges. I thought it was over. But Voss found out, Raymond said. Paige nodded, tears flowing freely now. He had everything: bank records, emails, witness statements. He told me if he didn't help me, he'd not only turn me in, he'd make sure I went to prison for the maximum sentence. I'd lose everything. "So you chose to betray someone you trusted," Natalia said, her voice flat but with an undercurrent of pain. "I know what I did was unforgivable," Paige said, her voice breaking. "I know I destroyed your trust, but tonight—" She pulled a phone from her jacket, expensive, clearly not her own. "Tonight, I overheard Voss on a call. He was talking about a permanent solution if the legal approach failed." The room went cold. "They're planning to kill you, Natalia," Paige whispered. "I heard them discussing it. They're done with courts and lawyers. They want you dead." Raymond took the phone carefully, as if it might explode. "Whose phone is this?" "Voss's. I took it from his office while he was in the bathroom. I know it was insane, but I couldn't let them murder you, not after everything you did for me." "How long before he realizes it's missing?" Octavia asked from the doorway. She'd arrived silently, her laptop already open. "He'll notice by morning, maybe sooner. That's why I came straight here." "Octavia, can you copy everything?" Raymond asked. "Give me 20 minutes. While Octavia worked, downloading every message, email, call log, and file from Voss's phone, Raymond studied Paige. She sat hunched forward, arms wrapped around her, looking like someone who'd finally hit bottom and decided to stop digging. "You know they'll come for you now," Raymond said quietly. "I know," she whispered, "but at least I'll be able to live with myself. Do you have somewhere safe you can go?" "My brother lives in Vancouver. I can cross the border tonight if I leave now." "Then go," Natalia said, speaking for the first time since Paige had confessed. Her voice was softer now, no longer ice. "Why are you helping me after what I did?" "Because," Natalia said slowly, "courage matters more than mistakes. You risked everything to warn me. That counts for something." "Before we continue with what happened next, I need you to do something for me right now. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, if you're invested in finding out whether Raymond, Natalia, and Octavia survive what's coming, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you think happens next, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of people who believe in justice, who believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. The next part of this story will blow your mind, and you won't want to miss it. So subscribe right now, turn on notifications, and let's continue this incredible journey together. 25 minutes later, all the data had been backed up to Octavia's encrypted servers. In the darkness, Paige left in a taxi arranged by Colin Harding, never looking back. Raymond watched until the taillights disappeared, wondering if they'd just made the right choice or signed her death warrant. "She's genuinely remorseful," Natalia said, standing beside him. Remorse doesn't erase damage, Raymond replied, but it takes real courage to risk everything to make it right. They went back inside, where Octavia had already started analyzing the phone's contents. What they found was worse than any of them had imagined. The phone contained encrypted messages between Voss and executives at Titan Industries. There were recorded phone calls discussing the lawsuit as a containment operation. There were emails outlining payments to witnesses, including the exact $75,000 that went to Page. There were instructions to Sterling and Pierce on how to deliberately sabotage Natalia's defense. And there was a final message sent just hours ago that made Raymond's blood run cold. Legal avenue failing. Authorized protocol terminus. Target to be eliminated within 72 hours. Make it look accidental. Budget approved, $5 million. Protocol terminus, a corporate euphemism for assassination. "They're going to kill her," Octavia said, her voice shaking. "They've already authorized it." "Not if we move first," Raymond said, already reaching for his phone. "Colin, we need FBI. Now." But Colin Harding shook his head grimly. "After what happened to your career 17 years ago, after everything we've learned about Titan's connections, do you really trust that someone in the FBI isn't on their payroll?" Raymond hesitated. The man had a point. "There's one person I trust," Natalia said suddenly. "Special Agent Lydia Kwan. She investigated corporate fraud cases for 15 years before joining the FBI. She's known for being completely incorruptible. If anyone will help us, it's her." "How do you know her?" Raymond asked. "She investigated one of my competitors 3 years ago. I testified as a witness. She's different. Cares about the law, not about politics or favors." "Call her," Raymond said. "Now." 40 minutes later, Special Agent Lydia Kwan arrived at the estate with a small team. She was in her early 50s, Korean-American, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of corruption the corporate world could produce. She listened to everything: the phone, the recordings, Page's testimony, the assassination threat, without interrupting once. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You realize what you're handing me," she finally said. "This is evidence of conspiracy, corporate espionage, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit murder. This implicates Titan Industries, one of the largest corporations in America. If I move on this and we fail, my career is over." "And if you don't move on it," Raymond said quietly, "an innocent woman dies, and one of the most important technologies of this century gets buried to protect fossil fuel profits." Agent Kwan looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You're the janitor who became a lawyer again." "I'm someone who knows what it's like when powerful people decide you're a problem that needs to disappear," Raymond replied. Kwan nodded slowly. "All right, we move tonight, but you three stay here behind security. If they've authorized an assassination, you're all targets now." "How long until you can make arrests?" Natalia asked. "If everything on this phone is authenticated, we can have warrants within 6 hours. By dawn, Cameron Voss and at least a dozen Titan executives will be in custody." "And in the meantime?" Octavia asked. "In the meantime," Kwan said grimly, "you stay alive." They didn't have to wait until dawn. At 4:15 in the morning, the estate's perimeter alarm screamed to life. On the security monitors, they saw 6 men in tactical gear approaching from multiple angles. They moved with military precision, weapons ready, clearly professionals. Colin Harding was already mobilizing his team. "Safe room, now." "How many guards do you have?" Raymond asked as they ran. 4 plus me. We're outgunned." "Police?" "Called them. 12 minutes out." 12 minutes might as well have been 12 hours. They reached the panic room, a reinforced concrete bunker beneath the main house, accessible through a hidden door in the wine cellar. Colin sealed them inside and headed back up with his team to hold the line. Inside the panic room, they watched the security monitors as the battle began. Colin and his team fought brilliantly, using the house's layout to their advantage, but the attackers were clearly former military or intelligence operators. They moved with coordinated efficiency, covering angles, clearing rooms, advancing steadily. One of Colin's guards went down, then another. "They're going to breach," Octavia said, her voice tight with fear. On the monitors, they watched one of the attackers place an explosive device on the panic room door, a shaped charge designed to blow through reinforced steel. Raymond pulled out his phone and dialed 911 again. "This is Raymond Cole. We are under attack at 2847 Hudson Terrace in Newton. Multiple armed assailants with military weapons and explosives. We need immediate SWAT response. People are dying." "Units are en route," the operator said. "ETA 4 minutes." 4 minutes, but the charge would blow in less than 1. Natalia grabbed Raymond's hand. Her palm was cold, trembling. "If this is the end—" "It's not," Raymond said firmly, but he squeezed her hand back. The explosive device began beeping. 5 seconds. 4. 3. Then, through the monitors, they saw something unexpected, flashing blue and red lights, not just 1 or 2 patrol cars, but an entire convoy, FBI tactical vehicles, SWAT trucks, local police backup, all converging at the estate at once. The attackers saw it too. They exchanged hand signals and retreated immediately, abandoning the explosive, disappearing into the darkness as efficiently as they'd arrived. The shaped charge sat there, still beeping, never detonating. 10 minutes later, FBI bomb disposal disarmed the device, SWAT cleared every building, and Special Agent Kwan opened the panic room door personally. "You're safe. We arrested Cameron Voss 20 minutes ago. When we told him we had him on conspiracy to commit murder, he started talking immediately. Gave up names, locations, everything. We have arrest teams moving on Titan executives right now." Raymond, Natalia, and Octavia emerged from the panic room, physically unharmed but emotionally shattered. Colin Harding was being treated for paramedics for a gunshot wound to his shoulder. 2 of his team members were being loaded into ambulances. Everyone was alive. "How did you get here so fast?" Natalia asked Kwan. "We were already mobilizing. The moment we authenticated that phone data, I knew they'd try something. We had teams positioned around the perimeter just in case." She looked at Raymond. "You were right not to trust the normal channels. We found out this morning that a deputy director in our Boston office has been on Titan's payroll for 6 years." The next day, when Raymond walked into the courtroom, the entire atmosphere had transformed. The journalists who'd once looked at him with bemused curiosity now watched with open respect. Lawrence Whitmore sat at the prosecution table, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight. Judge Brennan called the court to order. "Given the events of the past 48 hours, including multiple federal arrests, I am prepared to hear motions." Whitmore stood slowly, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence and federal investigations, the prosecution moves to dismiss all charges against Natalia Crane with prejudice." The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Natalia closed her eyes, tears streaming from her face. Judge Brennan struck her gavel for order. "Motion granted. Miss Crane, you are free of all charges. Furthermore, this court recommends that the Massachusetts Attorney General investigate prosecutorial misconduct in this case." She turned to Raymond, and her stern expression softened slightly. "Mr. Cole, in 30 years on this bench, I have never witnessed anything like what you've done here. You came into this courtroom as a janitor and reminded us all what the law is supposed to be, a shield for the innocent, not a weapon for the powerful. You have this court's deepest respect." As they left the courthouse, reporters mobbed them. Raymond kept his hand gently on Natalia's back, guiding her through the chaos. Octavia walked beside them, fierce and protective. They didn't speak until they were in the car, doors closed, finally alone. "We did it," Natalia whispered. "We actually won." "You won," Raymond said. "You never gave up, even when everything looked hopeless." "No," Octavia interjected. "We all won, together." And for the first time in 17 years, Raymond Cole felt like himself again. 3 months later, Raymond stood outside a renovated brownstone in Back Bay, looking up at the brass plaque beside the door, Cole and Cole Legal Foundation, Justice for All. Octavia stood beside him, holding a law school textbook. After everything that had happened, she'd decided to pursue both medicine and law, a dual degree that would take years, but felt absolutely right. "Think we can really make this work?" she asked. "We already have," Raymond said. 17 pro bono clients in our first month, people who were turned away everywhere else because they couldn't afford attorneys. "Thanks to the Crane Justice Initiative," Octavia added. Natalia hadn't just donated the initial $20 million to establish the foundation. She'd rallied other tech CEOs who'd followed the trial, building an endowment that would fund civil rights cases across the country for decades. As they entered the still unfinished office, they heard footsteps behind them. Natalia stood in the doorway, holding a bottle of champagne and wearing jeans and a simple sweater, the most casual Raymond had ever seen her. "I thought we should celebrate," Natalia said, that warm smile filling the bare room. Octavia immediately understood. "I'll go check on the furniture delivery. Might take a while." She disappeared with a knowing grin, leaving Raymond and Natalia alone. They stood together in the empty office, surrounded by boxes and possibilities. 3 months of late nights working on the foundation, 3 months of slowly rebuilding their lives, 3 months of something unspoken growing between them. "I never thanked you properly," Natalia said softly, "for standing up that day, for believing in me when everyone else walked away." "You don't need to thank me," Raymond replied. "You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever: purpose." Over the past months, something had shifted between them. It started as mutual respect, evolved into friendship, and now, standing here in the afternoon light streaming through tall windows, it had become something deeper, something neither of them had expected to feel again. "Raymond," she said, using his first name in that way that made his heart skip, "I know we come from different worlds. I know people will talk, but I've learned something important through all of this." "What's that?" he asked quietly. "That none of it matters, the money, the status, what people think. What matters is finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and stands beside you anyway." She paused, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I found that person." Raymond's breath caught. Since Lydia died 12 years ago, he'd never let himself love again. He'd buried that capacity along with his wife, convinced he'd had his one chance at happiness and lost it. But Natalia, who'd looked past the janitor's uniform and seen the man underneath, had broken through every wall he'd built. "I'm not the same person I was before," he said carefully. "I live a completely different life. I have nothing but—" "Nothing but integrity," Natalia interrupted gently, "and courage, and kindness, and a heart that knows how to fight for what's right." She touched his hand. "I had money and success and power. What I didn't have was someone who saw me as just me, not the billionaire, not the CEO, just Natalia." Raymond looked down at their hands, hers soft, his calloused from years of physical labor. Different, but fitting together with surprising ease. "Lydia was my first love," he said quietly. "I thought that chapter was closed forever. But maybe," Natalia said, her voice barely audible, "we get more than one chance, if we're brave enough to take it." He looked into her eyes, seeing past the wealth and fame to the woman who'd fought alongside him, who'd trusted him when she had every reason not to, who'd shown him hope wasn't something lost forever. Raymond leaned in slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to pull away. When their lips met, it was gentle, tentative, a promise between two people who'd been broken but found the courage to be whole again. "Found the champagne glasses," Octavia's voice echoed from somewhere in the back of the office. "Finally!"
They broke apart laughing, the tension dissolving into warmth. "Come on," Natalia said, taking Raymond's hand. "Let's show your daughter her new office, and maybe tonight the 3 of us can go to dinner, as a family." "I'd like that," Raymond said. Before stepping out, he paused at the door, looking once more at the sign. Cole and Cole Legal Foundation. A new beginning, a second chance. No, he corrected himself, a second life.
Raymond Cole's story reminds us that it's never too late to begin again, that justice isn't measured by wealth or status, but by the courage to stand up and fight, that heroes don't always wear expensive suits. Sometimes they wear janitor's uniforms and carry mops instead of briefcases. He shows us that failure isn't permanent, that betrayal can be overcome, that even after the deepest losses, love can find its way back. Most importantly, Raymond proves that every single person has the power to make a difference, to speak up, to refuse to accept injustice, no matter who tries to silence them. If you were in Raymond's position, what would you choose? A stable, quiet life where you stay invisible? Or would you risk everything to stand up for what's right, knowing it might cost you everything? Share your answer in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear that message. Share it with someone who's given up hope, who thinks the system is too big to fight, who believes that one person can't make a difference. Because Raymond Cole proved that one person standing up at the right moment with nothing but courage and conviction can change everything. Thank you for watching. Remember, justice doesn't always wear expensive suits. Love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and it's never, ever too late to become who you were meant to be. Never give up, never stop fighting, and never underestimate the power of one good person with the courage to stand tall. Until next time, this is After Dark Stories, reminding you that your story isn't over yet.